Hey Richard Grove, how you doing? Happy Mother's Day, and especially to all the moms. We want to send our love to you and our gratitude, for all the things that moms do that we see, and of course all the things that moms do that we never see, and maybe we never will know. All the amazing things that you've done for us, and we can't say how much we appreciate you. And happy Mother's Day. We love you. Wish all of you the very best. Today, I want to talk about passing through 4 tests. And I want to do this message because I believe that we all get tested a lot in life. And the tests that we endure do something for us and in us. And I believe that when we experience these tests, that God actually works through us. And I think that what happens to a lot of us in life is we keep growing from one level to the next. I'm going to use the word level, but you could pick any sort of, it's like going through school. You go through one grade and then to another grade. And the reality is, I think in our spiritual life, we evolve, we develop, we mature. And think of it this way. You can think about now how you look at life, how you look at, let's say, spirituality or God, religion, even your worldview. It's probably different than it was several years ago. And that's because we all grow. That's just a part of it. And that's a huge and a very important thing. And one of the things I think that helps us grow are these tests that we go through. And I want to walk us through these tests, and you'll see that Jesus provides a great example for us. So we're going to see how he helps us, learn how to get through these different tests. In James, it says, "Consider it all joy, brothers and sisters, when you face tests or trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance, develops strength of character, so that God can finish his work in you, so that you can be mature, ready, to another level and complete." So we all have some growing to do. And we all face different tests in life. And when one test dies down, around the corner is another test, right? So I'm going to talk about 4 big ones. There are many more. But we'll look at the life of Jesus and how he faced these tests, and how if we go through these tests, it can make us more complete, more whole, and take you to another level. And I think as we go through these levels, we become better people, but we become more fulfilled people at the same time. I think when Jesus said, "I came so you could have an abundant life," I think what he was talking about is, as you mature and as you go through these levels, you start to experience life at a different level. And so that's what my hope is for all of us today. So test number 1, are you ready? The test of isolation. The test of isolation. And you've probably experienced this at some point in your life where you were alone, or you felt alone. And this is an incredibly difficult test. And it's, of course, a very important thing for the circumstances that we're all in right now during this shutdown, isolation, lockdown period from the COVID-19. People are isolated, and different public health officials and others are already worried about what it's doing to people mentally and emotionally. So you're protecting your body from this virus, but what's it doing to you internally? And there are a lot of studies that talk about what isolation does to us. Isolation is incredibly stressful. And I was reading articles today about how it can lead to depression, how it can lead to a weakened immune system of all things. go figure, when we get isolated, it plays on us. It's not without accident that in military circumstances, if a prisoner of war is captured, they separate them from their comrades, right? If they can, they isolate them, because if you isolate somebody, you can break down their psyche, you can break down their emotions, you can kind of completely break down their defenses, and so Jesus has this test early. He goes out in his ministry. He goes out into the wilderness. It's kind of right when everything starts, or right before it all starts. He's out in the wilderness for 40 days. He's isolated and he's alone. And it talks about the temptation that came to him. And as in the gospel story, it's Satan. It's like the personification of evil, and comes to him and says to him, take this stone and turn it into bread. It's a temptation that comes with all of this isolation. Now you have to think, how is this thing played with your head? You know, I know some people, maybe they're doing fine, but the reality is I talk to all kinds of people, and those that can even put on the best face, underneath, this is wearing on you. It's wearing on people. It's breaking them down. And you have to think about how broken down Jesus would have been, because whatever we were going through, you'd have to multiply it, because he was in the wilderness. There wasn't a roof over his head. There was no one to talk to. There was no internet. There was no FaceTime. He's completely isolated for 40 days, not with his family, by himself. And what would that do to you? If you think about what you've struggled in your own mind with this lockdown period, what would it do to your psyche to be in the wilderness for 40 days? And Jesus is probably at his very wit's end, and he's given this test, take this stone and turn it into bread. Now, what does this test mean? Well, it could mean a lot of things, but one of the things that comes to my mind is, when you get to your wit's end, then where do you go? What resource do you draw on? It was kind of like the tempter was saying to him, why don't you just cheat? Why don't you just shortcut this? And, life has so many opportunities for you to cheat or shortcut, but this is an extreme test for Jesus, who goes through this test and finds that he has a different resource that he can draw on. I think of it like when I was in school. I learned how to get through school. I probably wasn't the best student, I got to be honest with you, but I learned how to get through school, and I learned how to get pretty good grades, but it wasn't probably doing it the right way. I didn't cheat, but I cheated myself. Fair enough? I didn't always master a subject. I learned how to get through a test. They call it cramming, and I learned how to just shove stuff together to get the grade that I needed to get. So unfortunately, I wasn't advanced enough in my thinking to think, I'm spending all this money, why don't I get a great education? I thought, let me find a way to get a good grade. And I think that's kind of what it is. And by the way, I remember one time in college, I put off all my term papers till the very last minute, and they're all due on the same day. I had five papers due I had to write. So I got my computer, I stayed up all night, I still remember it, stayed up all night and just jammed them all together. We call it you're cramming for a test, or you're just cramming something together. And that can kind of ease you by in certain things in life, but you can't cram through life. There's a lot of examples about farming in the Gospels, and you can't cram if you work on a farm. You can't go out in late August and look around and think, man, we got to get things hopping because harvest is coming in a month or two. It's too late. You don't sow, you don't reap. And time has to take its place, right? And so what this could be about is learning to do the process the right way, And, a lot of the great coaches now, they talk about going through the process. They talk, you hear this language now all the time with the great coaches. Now it's become, I don't know, almost cliche, but trust the process. Go through the process. In other words, don't just jump to, I want to score a touchdown or I want to win a game. Do the process right. Just keep doing the process right. And if you do the process right, eventually you're going to have the right outcome. What a huge thing to think about, you know? When you're isolated, it breaks you down and it takes you to what you're doing and how you're doing it. And maybe now, by the way, I don't advocate isolation forever. It ended for Jesus. He would have his retreat moments. I don't think these tests are meant to go on forever. Clearly, it's not good for us to be alone. And we know that. We know that from Scripture. I've been saying that for a long time, haven't I, to the church, you guys? Like, we're built to be together. We're built to be in community and connected. And so when we're not connected, you know how it describes we're a body? If you take a part of the body away, it immediately starts to die. Immediately. And that's what we're feeling. We're feeling this death, right? So it's a severe test. By the way, I was reading about little baby monkeys. As I was learning about connection and how little baby monkeys, they bond with their mother. And, you know, they did an experiment and they had monkeys that were with their moms, and they had some test babies who were with mannequins, not real mothers. And they even had breast milk and everything, and they made the mannequins as lifelike as they could. And then later on, they studied these babies, and they learned, they used the word in the study, they were distressed. They were distressed. Think about that. We need that connection, or we feel distress. And I think that's what a lot of people are feeling. But if I could say anything, I could say, as we go through this, let it do something for you and in you, not to you. Do you hear me? Don't let it do something to you. Let it do something in you and for you. Let it reforge the character that you have and the kind of person that you are. All right, the second test. This is the test of maturity. The test of maturity. And Jesus faces this test. You and I face this test. And I think this one has to do with, you know, we live our life sometimes at a shallow level. So we're talking about levels, right? Going through tests and advancing. And the more basic levels are, I don't know how to say it, but they're shallow. It's the word that comes to mind. Shallow. If you happen to be a star athlete, if you happen to, you know, be good looking, or, you know, you get great grades, or you're funny, you can make people laugh, whatever it is, there's a chance that you can use that to get through a lot of things in life, but not develop a depth of character. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't have any, but it's easy. You can get through school, or you can get a couple of good jobs, and you can stay with a shallow character and use these other things. And people do it all the time, and they're shallow, and they don't have a depth of character, but they're funny, or they're entertaining, or whatever the shallow thing is that gets them for a long way in life. And to go through maturity to another level, it requires depth. You remember Jesus telling this story about the farmer sowing seed, planting seed? And one of the seeds that doesn't make it actually has a good start, but it's planted in rocky, shallow soil. So it says rocky, but there was like a thin layer of soil, and then there's rock. So the seed would go in, and everything started off fantastic, just like a lot of people, and any of us, not to throw stones, but we start shallow, most of us, right? It's just how we start off. We're just surface. And so when you start off, the seed goes into the soil, and it starts to grow right away. Everything's going fantastic. And that happens with a lot of people. They get out of the gate and life is great. They make money, they make friends, whatever happens, and things are fantastic. And then it says the sun comes up. But when the sun comes up, this fantastic plant immediately starts to wilt, and it dies. Why? Well, is it because of the sun? Well, if you think about it, the sun is necessary for the plant to grow. We need the sun, right? The sun, photosynthesis, is what causes the plant to grow. And yet, at the same time, the sun causes it to die. So is the sun, which would be a test or persecution or difficulty or struggle, right? Intensity of the sun, is that the enemy? No, what's the problem? The problem is the depth of the soil. The soil represents us, our hearts, right? And if they aren't deep, when the sun rises, and it will, right? The tests come, the persecution, the difficulty, the trials of life will come. It'll wilt you, or it'll grow you. That's what the sun can do. It all depends on the depth, the soil depth, the depth of us. And so how do we get our lives to get deeper? How do we pass this test? By the way, let me tell you this, read you a little bit of this test that Jesus goes through, because it's, to me, it's an interesting story. There are these religious leaders who come to Jesus. I'm going to read it. It's in Matthew's Gospel, Matthew 22. The Pharisees, they went out and laid plans to trap him, to trap Jesus in his words. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by men, and because you pay no attention to who they are. So there's the setup for the question, for the trap. They're, buttering them up a bit. And tell us, then, what's your opinion? Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? It was one of these gotcha questions. It was a hot topic in that day, right? If you paid taxes to Caesar, maybe you weren't loyal to God, and then on the other side of the coin is if you don't pay taxes to Caesar, the Herodians are there and they're going to trap you up for not doing your civil duty, and it was kind of a no-win situation. But this is what's so important. Please listen to this. This happens all the time today. People get sucked into shallow thinking, no-win situations. The truth is, and they knew it, that's why they were trying to trap him. The truth is that's a complicated answer because it's a complicated situation. It's a complicated question. A lot of life is complicated. It's not always simple. It's complicated. And simple answers get you by for a certain age and a certain grade. And even simplistic faith gets you by for a while. But after a while, you start to have deeper questions. Things that, wait a minute, this is a little more complicated. This isn't adding up the way I learned it when I was young. By the way, learning it in a simplistic manner is fine when you're young. But when you get older, new questions start to surface. Unfortunately, a lot of the church and religious experiences just say, don't ask any questions. In other words, they want to just keep everyone at a childhood faith, which is crazy. You need an adult faith, and they're complicated things. I do whole classes and seminars on complicated issues, and I do a 2.0 series, and it takes time. I can't just spit out like overly simple answers, and so people sometimes they just want to make things overly simple, but that doesn't develop depth in you. Do you get what I'm saying? And by the way, in that day, there were there were more, but I'll give you 5 of the major, you could call them movements, you could call them, you could think of them almost like political parties, but they were political/religious parties, so you could call them subsets of Judaism. They didn't have it the way we do in Christianity, because there's Christians that were Baptists, and then there's Presbyterians, and there's Methodists, and there's Catholic, and there's Evangelical, and on and on. But these were different ways people thought this is the right way to be Jewish. And it was both sort of political and religious at the same time because they were together. Let me give you a few. So just a little education, a little bit of learning today. You with me? All right. There were the Pharisees. The Pharisees, I'll give you simple definitions and overview. The Pharisees basically believed that the reason they were under Roman control was because they had been disobedient to God. And if they would start obeying the Torah and being exact and making sure everyone else was exactly following it, that God would bring his blessing. He'd throw the oppressors off of them. So they were heavily into rule following. Now, right away, of course, you know, there's an end to every rule, and no rule is followed ever perfectly, and no one can ever follow all the rules. And so Jesus over and over again pointed out their hypocrisy. I wouldn't have time to go in that today, but there's all kinds of stories in the Gospels about Jesus pointing out their hypocrisy. So it's kind of like, yeah, some of the idea, you know, we should be good people and we should follow God with all of our hearts, but this meticulous, you know, he talked about they'd go out to they would tithe, you know, they'd cut a leaf into 10 pieces and give one little piece to make sure they were doing exactly right. And Jesus kind of saw through that and said, I think it's more of a heart thing. And anyway, the second group would be the Sadducees. And they were different from the Pharisees. And they were, maybe I'll oversimplify it just to say they were a little more lax, right? And you see this in, let's just say, modern Christian movements, you know. People, hey, don't worry about it. Some people are just hard line and, you know, and Bible this and, you know, and that's, hey, just, you know, the Sadducees just kind of a little more laissez-faire. And they cozied up to the Romans. Like, maybe we should just try to make some compromise here, right? And you could see how that went. Oh, you're compromisers. And there's a third, the Zealots. The Zealots were, as you know, the name kind of gives away, a little bit fanatical. And not only fanatical, but they were violent. They just saw it black and white, and they just said, well, you Romans are using violence, and so will we. And of course, Jesus you know, strongly moved away from that movement as well when he said, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. It's just kind of going to create an escalating thing. There were the Essenes. This was an interesting group. The Essenes were, you know, like the Pharisees on steroids. You know, they gave up the whole system. They said the whole system's corrupt. They wouldn't go to Jerusalem. They wouldn't go to the temple. They said the whole temple's corrupt. It was kind of corrupt, but they thought all of society was bad. They literally went out into the desert, created their own community out in the desert. It was extreme. And you would think of that like a modern day kind of a cult or something, where they just removed from society. Now, they had good things, they had some good beliefs and all, I'm not saying, but in other words, there were the Herodians, which are mentioned here, and there were others. But here's my point. Jesus never partnered fully with any of them. He never completely bought into any of them. And I think there's some wisdom here for us about our own growth. And that is this. So I've even read somewhere someone said maybe he was a Pharisee. I don't know if we can prove that or not. Maybe that's why he was, and he was so critical of them, like criticizing his own team. I don't know. But whatever it was, no one could lock Jesus down. They couldn't just get him to go in. Like, you know, how do you disagree with the Pharisees? Do they have a place? You know, do you have a card thing you have to sign? Jesus was never to be owned and labeled. This is big. Now, all of us, you know, we join a team. We join a, you know, you're a part of a, maybe you're part of a political party, or you're part of a sports team, or you're a part of a social economic team, and we get comfort from those teams. This is really important. It's not wrong to be on a team, to have a belief system, a structure, because we need it. It gives us self-worth and identity and confidence. So that's where you start. You start on a team. But if you're going to break through, you have to be able to see the weakness of your own team. You have to be able to see, wait a minute, they don't have all the answers about everything. There are other people that have a point of view as well. And others will go, no, you're compromising, you know. But the reality is, there's no one complete group that has everything figured out. And so Jesus has to answer this question: should I give taxes to Caesar or not? Right? And the two parties are there, the Herodians and the Pharisees, and whichever one he says, the other one's going to take advantage of. And you know, brilliantly, he defers, and he gets a coin. And he asks whose inscription's on it. And he says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. He just throws it right back in their lap, you know. And it's a beautiful, it's a beautiful deferment. But here's the other thing. Jesus doesn't feel the need, right, to take sides, to be right, to prove. And I think what happens is we go through this next test. It was a test for Jesus, but it's a test for us, you know. You get to that spot in your life where you're ready to grow. But to grow, you got to go sometimes, you know. Sometimes you got to go beyond the boundaries of the label that you've accepted for so long. And that's okay. By the way, just as an aside here, lots of, because there's some religious extremism in these groups I talked about here, the Essenes, I hear a lot of religious extremism now with this, you know, pandemic. It's just like, it always comes out at times like this. I remember Y2K, you know, there's all this religious extremism, and if you were around, and you remember that too, and none of it came to be. And I would just caution you, don't necessarily buy into this. Just like you wouldn't buy into other kind of extremism. It's out there. People are taking advantage of scamming people, you know, economically as they are spiritually, unfortunately. So stay grounded and let God take you deeper. All right. Third test, the test of surprise. Surprise. Didn't see that coming, right? And we all got surprised. No one saw this coming. There's a great story where Jesus goes through this test with the disciples, Matthew chapter 8. And it says in there that this storm came up without warning. Without warning. That's a key phrase in there. There was no warning. I mean, if there's a warning, we'd all get ready. We would all do the things that we need to do. And everyone would be ready, and it wouldn't be a test. It wouldn't be a surprise. But this particular pandemic surprised so many people, right? Surprised pretty much everybody. And the reality is, that's how life is. You know, life has so many surprises. And boy, it's hard. It causes stress, right? When you get caught off guard and you weren't ready. And I wanted to just say something that might help us think a little bit. You and you should prepare for a lot of things. There's a lot of things you should prepare for. You just know that are coming, you know. So, you know, there's basic common sense around saving money for bad times and, you know, doing things to plan for the future. We should do that. We've been given the ability to do that. So you should plan for a lot of things, but you can't prepare for everything. You can't. You may want to, especially if you're a super prepared planner, but you're never going to be ready for everything. And that's where faith comes in. And you have to realize I have to trust. The storm comes up. The disciples panic because they were caught by surprise. And they were pretty good at the lake. They knew what they were doing. But I got a chance to go on the Sea of Galilee a few years back. And our guide was telling us there's some mountains that surround that surround the lake. And at one point, there's the mountains go like this. And so when the wind comes, it gets funneled between these two mountains and it kind of shoots out like a jet stream. And he goes, it can cause some incredible storms. In fact, later on, I went around, and I love the Sea of Galilee. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's still kind of, I don't know, it's very rural there still. So you can kind of mentally picture what maybe it would have been like in the days of Jesus. But there's one little part where they have this marina and they have wakeboard boats, and right near that marina, there's a sign for kiteboarding and kite surfing, you know, because that's the kind of stuff where you go where there's a lot of wind. And this was known, but they didn't see this one coming, and bam, it hit them, and they thought they were going to drown. And you know, sometimes these tests, that's what you feel like. You feel like you're going to drown. People feel like that emotionally sometimes. They literally feel. Sometimes people can feel it in their chest. Sometimes people can feel it in their throat. Like, I'm just going to drown. And I want you to know something. The disciples were panicked, and you look over and Jesus is sleeping in the boat. Why? Because he knew something that they didn't know. And I think when you have confidence and faith that God is your Father, he's going to protect you, he's going to look out for you, that if he watches over the birds, as Jesus said, he's going to watch over you. If he loves them and takes care of them, how much more is he going to take care of you? So this test is a test that gets us to shift from ourself to trusting in God. And Jesus is sleeping there in the storm. Man, what a beautiful picture, right? That you can rest, you can literally close your eyes and sleep and know that this is going to be okay. Last test, last one. It's a test of falsehood. And here's what I mean by that. Jesus gets to the end and he's falsely accused. He's done all this stuff, right? He's helped people, he's served people, he's done his best to feed people, and you know, and as it says in Acts, went around doing good. And in the end, he's falsely accused. He goes into Jerusalem, they arrest him, they bring him before a mock trial, and they just start kind of making things up. And boy, you could think about, if you put yourself into his shoes, the angst or the anger or the agony that you would feel to be here knowing they're just making things up. And Jesus has this calm way about him where he knows that they didn't get it and they weren't going to get it. And he wasn't trusting himself to people. When he came into Jerusalem, they were all clapping and cheering for him. By the end of the week, they're against him and they're shouting, "Crucify him." And the trial that he was in, it was interesting because you could see he's calm there. Do you see how he's calm through all of these things? That's what faith does. It just makes you calm because you realize this guy has no power. He said, Pilate thought he had all this power over Jesus, and he says, "You don't have any power over me." I love that. And it's true. You can either you can give people power over you or not. That's your choice. So, well, no, this guy has power. This is authority. I think it's deeper than that. I really do. I think this is a message about not letting people, you know, you don't give people, and here's how you do it. If you entrust yourself to people, early in John's gospel, Jesus does a miracle and all the people come around, and then Jesus says, no. And it says in John's gospel, there's a verse, he didn't entrust himself to them because he knew what was in the heart of a man. People can be this way, and then all of a sudden they're way over here. They love you and they hate you. And what would it mean when he didn't entrust himself? I think what he's saying is, I'm not taking my identity, my validity, my self-worth, none of that I'm accepting from these people. Now, if someone pays you a compliment or they're happy for you, that's fine. I heard one person say it like this. I've always remembered it. He said, if someone gives me a compliment, I take it like a bouquet of flowers. And I smell them, and I look at them, and I enjoy them. Maybe I even put them in a vase for a few days, and then I throw them away. I enjoy it. I appreciate it. But I don't keep them around forever. I don't live and die on it, because those die. You know, you can't just prop up some dead flowers. And this is the thing. You can't entrust yourself to to the opinions of other people. This is a huge task. When you get through this and you can say, you know what, I am so confident that I'm trusting in what God thinks of me. That's what matters the most. And, you know, we all need the approval of others. It's how we kind of are wired. But as we mature, and I'm talking, we get to the pinnacle here, you get to a place where you don't need it. You just don't need it. I want to wish you the very best. I know life has all kinds of tests, and these are 4 of the big ones. And I hope as you think about them this week that you'll remember God's going to carry you through, right? These tests are for our good. James says, count it all joy when you face tests and trials of many kinds. Let's pray together. Dear Lord, thank you, our loving God, for carrying us through these tests, taking us to another level. You know what people are facing today. You know things about them that, God, the number of hairs on their head, you know the details of the pain, the struggle, the fear, the frustration, whatever they're going through. But God, remind them today that you're with them. You're with them through that storm. You're with them through that criticism. You're with them through that surprise. You're with them every step of the way. God, we put our faith and our trust in you. In Christ's name, amen. Amen, Orchard Grove. I hope you have a beautiful day. Happy Mother's Day. God bless.